Welcome to our ADA Symposium. I want to tell you it's the fourth one, but I'd probably be wrong. At any rate, an annual event for us. We've got a lot of things to go through today with you, and think that the experience will be very helpful for you as we try to make you more aware of ADA concerns on campus. Right out of the chute, we're going to break from the norm. We have a prepared schedule. We're not going to follow it. Allow me to introduce Katie with Student Empowerment Network. She has some conversation for us to hear about an auction. Katie?
Hello, I'm Katie Rogers. I'm an occupational therapy student. I just wanted to let you guys know we're having a silent auction outside. It will support occupational therapy students who will be traveling to the Ukraine this summer. We will be working in some orphanages to kind of provide care and introduce the field of occupational therapy there. There is no obligation to pay today. We will contact you by email or phone either tomorrow or tonight or sometime, and then we will set up arrangements to get you the item that you had bid on and won. So we're just right outside the door to the right. We have lots of goodies, so stop by and come see us. Thank you.
If you don't stop in, Kathy Custard will take away all of it because she signed up for everything, and she's the only one that signed up. And nobody wants Kathy to have it all. I'd like to introduce Mark. I stand corrected, somebody else. Mark Panning has been a member of the ADA committee for a number of years and has been very, very, very helpful to us putting together websites and lots of other kinds of awareness documents, as well as keeping us focused on what the committee should be doing. Mark Panning.
Thank you. Welcome to the ADA Committee Spring 2010 Symposium. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. Our theme this year is dealing with disabilities and helping oneself. Our activities today are broken up into several presentations. You'll hear from the Student Empowerment Network, which is a campus-wide organization committed to empowering each member to have knowledge and political savvy to make positive change for and with individuals with disabilities, while increasing an understanding among the student body regarding the nature of various disabilities. If you happen to be a student, it would be a very worthwhile organization for you to belong to. Then we'll also hear about recent updates from the ADA, American with Disabilities Amendments Act, with the legal ramifications that have come about in the past year. Following that, you'll hear about a self-help and attitude presentation, topics like what needs to be done and why the ADA Amendments Act isn't always helpful or complete. What are the real barriers and what are the easy, simple ones that can be rectified and upgraded at little cost? Comments about invisible impairments. What professional track can an impaired person follow or perhaps avoid? What is available for professional development and degree programs for those committed individuals wanting to help impaired people? Then you will hear about student disabilities management and comments from the Counseling Center. And following that, we'll have a recap of the recent ADA committee survey that was completed here at the beginning of this year. Again, I want to thank you for coming to our symposium. We've got a lot of good information for you. Before we start though, I just quickly would like to show you a couple things on our ADA committee website. And I'll ask Don to run the computer and I'll kind of just describe it. The committee website is a site that we use to relay a lot of information that the committee is working on. We have some forms, we have announcements that we put on there. When you go to the committee site, as you can see where we previously came from, the alphabetical listing, we're under A for ADA committee. You'll see if you've been to the site in the past, it's a little different look. We kind of followed the path of the www.creighton.edu site and changed our look a little bit to reflect theirs. One of the things I just wanted to point out was, Don, if you could go to the second listing there, ADA information. This has got some real pertinent information, and we made this a little easier for people to find. And so it just talks a little bit about Creighton and how we deal with the ADA issues on campus for both employees and students. There's another section below that, if you could go to the campus maps. And go to the bottom one. A lot of people have questions about where do you park when you come to campus. One of the maps that we have on our site, they're identified with the blue symbols, kind of show on campus where you can find accessible parking. If you could scroll in just a little bit, you'll see that there's several buildings that have accessible parking if you have walking limitations. One of them, which a lot of people don't really realize, is just on the east side of St. John's Church, there's accessible parking there. And that's what this map could help kind of point out, where you would need to go if you're going to visit campus and you have some mobility impairments. Okay, if you could go back. And go back one more. Go back to the main page. If you go to the About the ADA Committee, this is an important site here. Then go to the ADA Committee members. There you go. This is how you can contact us. There's a number of people on the committee from all over the campus, all of the presidential areas. And we've got our contact information if you want to call us on the phone or if you want to send an email. It should be fairly simple to find. You just on the left side, click on the committee members. Go back to the main page. And now a feature that we just recently added is a report a barrier. And this is yet another way that you can get in contact with the committee and identify the little red button on the bottom right. If you come across a barrier on campus or if somebody points it out to you, you can quickly come to the site and get the ball rolling on identifying the barrier and what that barrier happens to be. What you do is you collect, we have category building in the type of barrier, so you just select the category that it would best fit, give a location of a building. We got most all the buildings on campus. There's a type of barrier where it gives you a chance, it could be like you need signage for parking spots, or there could be something blocking the elevator so that somebody in a wheelchair couldn't get in. You can identify that here on this site. And then there's a description section where you could actually enter more descriptive of what you're trying to describe that you feel would be a barrier for whatever reason. And the bottom one, you could put a contact, either phone number, your name, email address, something that we can follow up on, and then get movement happening for this barrier so that the campus will be accessible for everyone. And then go ahead and just put your Dawn in there for your name. Then just hit submit barrier, and actions process, that submits it and gets the ball rolling on the barrier that you're trying to identify. And then when you're done, just click and close the box or the red X for that window. And that's all there is to it. So anyway, that's what I had today. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Then we're ready to move on with the rest of our symposium. Thank you again for being here.
On your table is are two sheets of paper that I'd like to have you look at. One is some frequently asked questions that are put together. It just gives you a little bit of an insight on what ADA means. And then the other one, if you pass it around amongst you at the tables, if you came across any architectural barriers on the way that you thought we should be made aware of, if you could simply fill out that form, and you can see quickly that there's lots of room for comments, so tell us lots of things. Next on our program, Katie's going to talk to us about the Student Empower Network. I just grilled Katie about who Katie really is. And she's a second-year occupational therapy student and the president of the Student Empower Network. And she doesn't want me to say this, but she's from Wisconsin. I'm not sure why she's ashamed of that. Anyway, welcome, Katie.
Thank you. As he said, I'm the president of Student Empowerment Network, and I'm also a second-year occupational therapy student. Many of you stopped by our booths out in front. And we were doing a little event out there. We termed it Discovery Days, and there were stations that you guys got to go through and experience a few different disabilities that are pretty common in the population that everyone has to experience and go through daily, and you guys all got to take a little turn. All of the people out there putting on those booths are the members of our SEN team, and I just want to take a minute to recognize all of them. So I don't know if they came in, but Kirsty Craig, Adrian Devitt, Kylie Herring, and Valerie Nelson, and then we had a couple extra volunteers today too, Megan Geyer, Christina Schroeder, and Haley Benner. So we hope you enjoyed that and learned a little bit while you guys were going through those stations. Group working to empower students and community members with disabilities. The students in the organization encourage public awareness of disability issues and campus and community accessibility. We have some pictures in there too, so you guys can see some of the events that we've been doing. Is SEN mission. Student Empowerment Network is a campus-wide organization committed to empowering each member to have the knowledge and political savvy to make positive change happen for and with individuals with disabilities, increasing understanding among the student body regarding nature of various disabilities. SEN reflects the Jesuit traditions of Creighton University by addressing the needs and the rights of disabled students to receive education that is equal to that of their non-disabled colleagues. SEN, like Creighton University, believes the ethic and cultural diversity and core values. By serving with and for disabled students, SEN strives to ensure justice in education with celebrating and diversity that makes each Creighton student unique. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the events that we've done this past year. This was our scavenger hunt on wheels. It was the second time that we did this event. We had different students sign up in groups of 4 or 5, and we had about 5 or 6 teams this year, and each group had to have one team member in the wheelchair at all times, and they had to go through different areas of campus that we designated, and each spot they had to get to had some kind of barrier or challenge that they had to get through. So as that picture saw before, they had to use the ramp, and it required getting a key and figuring out how to get that ramp turned on, and just to kind of, again, promote awareness that if you were in a wheelchair or even on crutches or something, that stairs are difficult, or a ramp that might be pretty high, or even that pretty big hill that we have in the middle of campus can be pretty hard if you're trying to push on a wheelchair. We also had a rule that no one could push them. You had to actually propel the wheelchair yourself. You want to go to the next? I guess this talked about it too. So yeah, there's a picture of one of the students who participated using the wheelchair lift. And then this is the Nebraska Red Dogs basketball team. It's a wheelchair basketball team that competes, I believe, nationwide. They have quite a few tournaments, or at least in a couple different states. And in the past couple of years, we've done some tournament. We've partnered with them to do a few things as well. I think 2 years ago we did an actual tournament where they played against some of the Creighton basketball players, and the Creighton basketball players had to sit in wheelchairs while they played against them. And this year, they were doing a fundraiser that they called Hoop Fest, and they needed some help fundraising for all of the tournaments that they were going to be traveling to. So each player on the team had to shoot so many shots in an hour, and for every shot they made, people had sponsored them to give them, you know, like $2 for every shot they make in an hour. And we helped out. We helped fund them to be able to use Creighton's gyms, so we paid for them to have one of the courts. And then about 25 volunteers from Sen went and helped be the rebounders so that they could get the balls back a little bit faster to be able to shoot as many shots as they could, and help keep track so that they knew exactly how many shots they had made. It was a really cool event. A lot of the kids had a lot of fun, and I think all of the Sen volunteers had a lot of fun helping out with it. So we hope that next year we can continue and maybe do another event on campus, because that helps bring in some of the Creighton community as well, and maybe do another basketball tournament. And I know a lot of people enjoyed watching the basketball players play against them, so we're hoping to do that again. So that is it. So thank you very much, and thank you for participating out in the front part.
Clearly, what Student Empower Network is doing matters, and I think you saw that today. I think one more round, because what they're doing out in the corridor now for Discovery Days, what they're doing with the silent auction going to Ukraine, all of that speaks to where their heart and their passion really is. So one more time for Sen, please. There's never an easy way for me to introduce Amy Bones. I really think the world of this woman and what she does for university and what she's doing for the ADA committee, but I'd like to bring her up here now and just say that Amy is the general counsel for the university, and let it go at that. She's got other titles, I know that. She's got a wealth of knowledge for us to learn, and she's going to go through it now for the next several minutes just to bring you up to speed on what that law really is about. Amy Bones, please.
Last year we talked about the fact that the Congress had passed the ADA Amendment Act, and we talked about how much broader the law would be under the ADA Amendment Act. Well, after that happened, then the EEOC is directed in that law to create a number of new regulations, and so that's what has happened to date. The EEOC issued proposed regulations back in about September of this year. Those were open for comment for about 60-day period, so the comment period has closed, but we don't have final regulations as of yet. What the EEOC does is they take the comments, which were substantial, they take those comments, they review those, they decide if there's a need to make any changes in the regulations, then they run it also through the Office of Management and Budget. So eventually, and I think relatively soon, we will be getting some final regulations under the ADA Amendment Act. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about today, is what do those proposed regulations look like? And keep in mind that there may be some changes when we get final regulations, but we'll talk through some of those proposed regulations. And then just to refresh everybody's recollection, what the ADA Amendment Act did was it was really Congress saying, we are so unhappy with the Supreme Court in the way they've really narrowed and narrowed and narrowed what the ADA Act was supposed to do. We want to get back to what the law was originally intended to do, and that is to focus on whether a person with a disability is being discriminated against. So what happened was the basic definition of what is a person with a disability, that stays the same, but the interpretation surrounding what those words mean is where everything is going to change. And I can tell you that it is a much broader law, and many, many more people will be considered persons with disabilities. So we know that for a fact. So let's look at this definition here. A person with a disability means having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, or a person who has a record of such an impairment or is regarded as having such an impairment. So I just want to give you one example of how the regulations are really broadening the concept. You see the phrase substantially limits a major life activity. What the courts had done is they had basically interpreted that to mean that the impairment had to prevent or significantly or severely restrict the ability of a person to perform a major life activity. So almost every case that went before the Supreme Court, the answer, or any court for that matter, the answer was the person either is not a disability or the person does not need the reasonable accommodation that they're requesting. So let me just give you an example of what the proposed regulations say. They say with respect to substantially limits, an impairment is a disability within the meaning of this section if it substantially limits the ability of an individual to perform a major life activity as compared to most people in the general population. An impairment need not prevent or significantly or severely restrict the individual from performing a major life activity in order to be considered a disability. So basically in the regulations they're saying, forget anything that any of the cases have ever said. This is the new standard, and all those old cases are just not good law anymore. They go on to say that the term substantially limits will be construed in favor of broad coverage. There must be 10 places in the proposed regulations and the comments to those regulations where they say, construe this broadly. Just because just because this particular major life activity is not in the list of major life activities, that doesn't mean it's not a major life activity for purposes of coverage. So as I said, I can't emphasize enough that what we're really looking at is a very, very broad law. Here's the example that they give for substantially limiting. They give the example of someone with a 20-pound lifting restriction that is not of short-term duration is substantially limited in lifting and need not also show that he is unable to perform activities of daily living that require lifting in order to be considered substantially limited in lifting, okay? A major life activity, which we'll go through the list that's in the regulations, one of the major life activities is lifting. So they're basically saying if you have a 20-pound lifting restriction and it's not a temporary thing, then you may be qualified as a person with a disability. So it's going to be a completely new mindset for us and for most employers, because where the focus will be is no longer really on whether or not somebody is a person with a disability. The focus is going to be on what is a reasonable accommodation for that individual, okay? Okay, we've talked about that, so I'm just going to move right on. Okay, we've got some rules that are going to be used to determine whether or not somebody has a disability. And we've talked about the first two of those, I think. Actually, the second one is interesting. It says you don't have to have extensive analysis. If you'll recall, there used to be a pretty significant amount of medical information that needed to be gathered before a determination could be made as to whether or not somebody had a disability. And the regulations are basically saying, we'll get to this in a little bit, they're saying in some cases you don't need medical information at all, because we're going to basically say if a person is in this category, they in effect are a person with a disability. And even in those cases where that's not a sort of per se definition, you don't need a lot of medical information to make your determination. There used to be a debate about whether or not you had to be limited in more than one major life activity to be considered a person with a disability. And again, the regulations say, nope, if you're in any one of these categories, that's all you need to be in for purposes of determining if you're a person with a disability. Because there used to be a question, if you couldn't do certain activities, did that necessarily mean that you were limited in the major life activity of working? And so that was an issue that employers had to deal with. And we really don't have to deal with that any longer, because if they're in one of the categories that we'll go over, then that's a major life activity in which they may have a substantial limitation. Okay, mitigating measures. Does anybody know what a mitigating measure is? Mitigating measure is something that Katie is showing us what a mitigating measure is. Thank you, Katie. Eyeglasses, anything that a person might use to, in effect, correct their disability. And it used to be the case law had developed such that those mitigating measures were taken into account in determining whether or not somebody had a disability. For example, there was a case of an individual who had high blood pressure, and he had to take medicine for that high blood pressure. So his employer said, well, this person is not a person with a disability because with his medication, he's fine. And that used to be the standard we could apply. We can't apply that standard any longer. With a very limited exception, we can still consider eyeglasses and contact lenses as mitigating measures. Anything else is out the window. What we look at is what a person is like without any sort of mitigating measure they use for purposes of determining whether or not a person is a person with a disability. So for example, if a person takes medication, we have to consider what would they be like without that medication for purposes of determining if they are a person with a disability. So just by show of hands, is that going to mean we're going to have more people that are people with disabilities or fewer people? How many people think more? Yeah, I mean, it's just, like I said, we'll still do that first part of the analysis, but it'll be very brief. And again, let me just read what the regulations, the questions and answers about the regulations have to say about that. The Americans with Disabilities Amendment Act directs that the positive effects from an individual's use of one or more mitigating measures be ignored in determining if an impairment substantially limits a major life activity. In other words, if a mitigating measure eliminates or reduces the symptoms or impacts of an impairment, that fact cannot be used in determining if a person meets the definition of disability. Instead, the determination must focus on whether the individual would be substantially limited in performing a major life activity without the mitigating measures. I'm sorry, Chuck. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. But what I cannot figure out is, I think that's exactly right for purposes of determining if you're a person with a disability. But then the question becomes, and I don't think it's been answered, for purposes of a reasonable accommodation, it makes no sense to say, well, we're going to give accommodations as if the person didn't have the cochlear implant or whatever the mitigating measure is. So I think that's, to me, that's the fundamental issue that we have to figure out, is if in fact we say we determine if they're a person with a disability without thinking about the mitigating measures, then do mitigating measures come in for purposes of determining reasonable accommodation? And I think it has to, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. But I haven't seen anything that tells me that. Okay, episodic. There used to also be a question about whether or not if a person had an episodic condition or a condition that was in remission, were they still considered to be a person with a disability when the condition was in remission or they weren't experiencing the episode. So again, episodic kinds of things, one would think often you take medication to deal with those. So what do we think the answer to the question is? If somebody is somebody with an episodic condition, do we think that's a person with a disability? Yeah, good, okay. Okay, so here's our answer exactly. The person with epilepsy who takes medication to control the seizures most likely will be covered because we consider what her limitations would be without the medication. We talked about this. We don't have to have more than one limitation as to a major life activity. And again, we don't construe that major strictly. We construe it very broadly. So we actually, in the law, get a non-exhaustive list of things that are considered major life activities. I don't know how many of you can actually read that. but it's things like caring for oneself, bending, performing manual tasks, speaking, seeing, breathing, hearing, learning. Interestingly, the EEOC, when they were drafting their regulations, they say, yes, there's a list of major life activities in the law, but we're going to add a few more. So the EEOC has added, let me go back a page. They have added, in addition to the ones that are on that list, they've added sitting, reaching, and interacting with others. Now, what will be fascinating for the lawyers in the audience, but maybe not for anybody else, is whether or not the EEOC has the authority to do that. I mean, can the EEOC, which is a regulatory agency, which is supposed to be implementing the law by regulations, can they go ahead and say, well, gosh, we think these other things should be added as well? So I'm afraid that one of the things that may happen with these regulations is they may be challenged in court, which will be it will not be a fortunate thing, because as I was just saying to John Pierce when we were walking in here, it's really unfortunate that the law was applied as it was, to the point that Congress felt like they had to pass a new law, because really, if we look back at the goal of the ADA, it's to make sure that people with disabilities have equal access in the workplace and in the educational environment. And it's just a shame that we really went down a path with lots of litigation. So we'll hope we don't do that with the ADA Amendment Act. Okay, the other thing that was clarified in the new law is that the ADA Amendment Act includes major life activities as being operation of major bodily functions. Okay, it was never clear if you're limited in things that you had no control over, did that mean you were a person with a disability? So that question was answered in the ADA Amendment Act, and they said yes. Major life activities include the operation of major bodily functions. And again, interestingly enough here, the EEOC said, yeah, that list is okay, but we want to add some more. So they added some more major bodily functions to their list in the regulations, including lymphatic, musculoskeletal, special sense organs and skin, and cardiovascular. And they say, again, in their questions and answers, they say the purpose of adding major bodily functions to the list of major life activities is to make it easier to find that individuals with certain types of impairments have a disability. So again, we've got the broadening sense of the EEOC. We're going to kind of skip over this regarded as, because I think we've got enough to think about with some of these regulations, so we'll skip that for today. They do say if it's a minor or transitory impairment, you're not covered under the ADA Amendment Act. And they say that's something that's lasting less than 6 months. But they do say, well, that's generally, because there could be some exceptions to that as well. So what we have here are some examples. As I told you, they've got some examples of things. If you have these conditions, you're basically going to be assumed to have a disability without any further analysis. And again, this is a slide that probably not very many of you can see, but it includes such things as, I can also not see from up here, deafness, blindness, intellectual disability, which is the term that used to be mental retardation, partially or completely missing limbs, mobility impairments, autism, cancer, cerebral palsy, diabetes, epilepsy, HIV, AIDS, multiple sclerosis, etc. So they basically say if you have that, you don't even need to do an analysis about it, okay? Remember, like I said, we always used to ask for some medical information to support someone's request for a reasonable accommodation. And then we have some impairments that don't quite fall in that list, but they still say these may be substantially limiting for some individuals, but not for others, and will require some analysis, but they say we don't want you to get into a huge exhaustive medical analysis even for these impairments. And those include such things as asthma, high blood pressure, back and leg impairments, learning disabilities, et cetera. So we've got a very broad standard for the people that will have disabilities. So I think where we need to, okay, so we talked about this is the exception to the 6-month rule. So they say, yeah, we said 6 months, but there might be some situations where even that could be considered a disability. So what I was going to say is where we really need to be spending our time and attention is on reasonable accommodations, okay? So reasonable accommodations are any change in the work environment that's going to help people do their job or that enables an applicant for employment to enter into and complete the job application process. One thing I want to say is that I'm talking mostly about the ADA Amendment Act in the context of employment. We'll get to students in a little bit, but this is, most of the case law has really built up around the employment arena. And there are a couple things that suggest that from a student perspective, things don't change quite as drastically, but I think we'll have to kind of see what happens on that front as well. We're getting into that. But one thing I wanted to say is one of the things that the ADA talks about and hasn't changed is the definitions of what a reasonable accommodation is haven't changed, nor has the idea of an undue hardship. Okay, so what that means is there are times when someone may ask for an accommodation and the organization says that's an undue hardship, we can't do it. But before you can make that kind of a determination, you have to engage in an interactive process with the person. And since I've been talking an awful lot, does anybody want to tell me what they think an interactive process means? Anybody? What's that? Right, you need to, thank you, Katie. You need to talk to them. You need to sit down and say to the individual who may have requested an accommodation, what is it you need to be able to do your job? Okay, it's not, interactive process sounds kind of like a hard thing to do, but really it's just sitting down and saying, what is it that's keeping you from being able to do your job? Okay, so it's a pretty simple process. And one of the things in your handouts that you have at your table, we've got a reasonable accommodation form at Creighton. Okay, it's on the ADA website. We'll need to change that because we're asking for some medical information in that form, and I think we'll probably need to kind of revise the form. But it's important to understand that people that may need an accommodation, they can ask their supervisor if they're comfortable about that. They can ask Human Resources if they would rather have the conversation with Human Resources, or they could talk to a member of the ADA committee. We would get you to the right person. So I guess I just want to encourage people to think about that interactive process of talking to someone if you do need an accommodation. Okay, here's the part about what does the ADA Amendment Act mean in terms of students. And we'll see the broad statement there, nothing requires post-secondary institutions such as Creighton to make modifications that would fundamentally alter the nature of the services, facilities, privileges, et cetera, that are involved. And we have a dual law here. We have the ADA law, but for students we also have a law that's called the Rehabilitation Act, or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. What's interesting is that the changes in the ADA kind of move over into the Rehabilitation Act as well. So we're going to have to see what that means, but the early pronouncements were that not too much would change for students. But as I was looking through some of the information about the regulations, we do have a couple of interesting comments from a couple of advocacy boy, I cannot talk this morning, I'm sorry, advocacy groups for students. And they are saying, hold on just a minute, you've given these regulations, all the examples you have in them are in the employment context. And they are specifically asking that some of the regulations be broadened, or at least examples be given of what this would mean in the higher education context. So from that perspective, I think we need to keep in mind that things may change for students as well. And I thought it would be interesting to just read a little bit out of this excerpt from that higher education group. They say, we note that while the majority of case law has been brought in the employment context, the definition of who is protected applies across titles and in a wide variety of contexts, such as higher education, access to accommodations for the administration of standardized tests, public accommodations, and state and local services. It is therefore critically important that the regulations discuss these circumstances so the regulations effectuate the purposes stated by Congress in amending the ADA. And where I really think some of what we will be seeing is in the context of students or graduates in licensure exams, and bar exam, other licensure for other things that they want to take, because that's where there have been a number of cases that made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And what the court said in those cases is these students have done well all the way through their academic career. Therefore, they cannot prove that they're disabled. Therefore, they will not get reasonable accommodations in terms of extra time on standardized tests and those kinds of things. That's one of the places that there's actually some congressional history about the fact that Congress thought that was wrong. So again, if I can read up here, I'm just going to read a little bit of that to you. This is sort of an exchange between two senators when the bill was getting ready to be passed. The one senator says, "I'm pleased that this bill will sustain the rights and remedies available to individuals with disabilities, including individuals with learning disabilities." And then he asks for the chairman to agree that the bill rejects the assumption that a person who has performed well academically cannot be substantially limited in activities such as learning, reading, writing, thinking, or speaking. And the answer is yes, I would agree with that. As chairman of the Education and Labor Committee, I agree that the bill rejects the holding or the case law that academic success is inconsistent with the finding that an individual is substantially limited in such major life activities. So they're saying we're not going to penalize students who may have been successful because they've developed coping mechanisms and other things that help them at least progress to a certain stage in their education, and then say, because you've done so well, we're not helping you in your higher education. So I think we have to stay tuned to see if the regulations are going to actually address some of the issues in higher education or where that particular comment will go. But again, like I said, they say no fundamental alteration in our curriculum, but I think we still have to be cognizant of the fact that we do have a very broad law in front of us. So what I had said last year, and what at least remains true as of today, is that we don't think we have to make changes in our academic requirements, but we may be required to make modifications to let students with disabilities meet those academic requirements. So that might be things like changing how long you have to take a test, how long do you have to complete your degree, those kinds of things. So I would urge everybody who has responsibility over academic areas, let's look at our technical standards. Let's make sure they still make sense. Let's think about the kinds of requests that might be coming to us for accommodations so that we're prepared when we get these final regulations. So again, we've said this, I've said this 5 times, I won't say it again other than to say we're going to shift our focus from disability to reasonable accommodations. And then this is more for the people from an academic perspective. Is there a process in place to determine if somebody's request would be a fundamental alteration? There are cases out there that we'll have to look at that just say, okay, somebody wanted, for example, I can't give you a good example of what they wanted, but they wanted something in the curriculum and the instructors said that is a fundamental alteration. The process that they had to go through was they got all of the experts in that department to sit down and talk through what would this mean and why do we think it would be a fundamental alteration in our curriculum or program. If they did that and they still come to the conclusion that it's a fundamental alteration, then I think we've got good supporting documentation. But I think what we can't do, and what I don't think anybody has done in the past, is we can't just have a knee-jerk reaction that says, you want to do that? That is not allowed in our curriculum. We have to go through a thought process. And again, on the employment front, I think we have to go through that same thought process. This person is requesting X as a reasonable accommodation. Can we support that? Or are there some other things that we could do that would still accomplish the purpose, which is to let them do their job, but maybe at a more reasonable cost to Creighton, or something that would be easier to implement. So it's going to be just a different way of thinking about things. Okay, we talked about this. You just have to have a process in place, well documented. And again, we talked about this as well. I really think it's time, it's a good time for particularly our health sciences schools. Let's look at our technical standards. Let's make sure, let's see if there's anything out there that's newer or better, or things that we really want to revisit in this new context. I am finished. Thank you.
But you only have a few more minutes to sign up or bid on the silent auction. The women from SEN, Student Power Network, are going to go to class at 12:35. So make the mad rush. I encourage you not to bid on the wine. That's mine. But do what you got to do. The program that we want to talk to a bit now is a little bit about the survey. Lee Budesheim will come to the lectern as soon as I get out of his way. But several years ago, Amy Matthews led a group through a survey on campus that gave us some information about what the ADA committee ought to be doing. What do the Creighton constituents know about ADA? Certainly you've become exposed to it, if not before, at least today with what Amy Bones gave to us in her presentation. And there'll be more to follow. But we just recently went through that same survey again because we wanted to see if our committee was being successful in education and awareness. The remarks that Lee will give us are in part his work, but also he was augmented in this survey with Amy Matthews again and Mark Panning. So for that, the ADA committee is very thankful. But Lee comes to us from psychology department, a faculty person, a chair of the department, and he's been with the ADA committee, if memory serves, about 18 months. I may be wrong about that. But at any rate, Lee Budesheim.
I know you guys are still eating, so hopefully I won't say anything that'll disrupt your appetite at all. But we did a survey on campus through the online Blue Q tool that we have, and about 500 people participated in this survey. I want to caution you that the conclusions that we draw from this are going to be based on those people who chose to take part, and they may not be like the people who didn't choose to take part. So be aware of that as we go through it. The survey was available from the end of the fall semester last year to the beginning of the spring semester this year for 2 or 3 months with a nice Christmas break in between. Remember, these are self-reported perceptions for those people. They indicate their level of familiarity with the ADA, their knowledge of who they would contact, etc. And we'll talk a little bit as I go through this about just how much we can trust people's self-reports of this data. See if I can get this to work. So the very first question we asked is just to indicate yes or no, are they familiar with the American Disabilities Act? And about 91% said yes, they are familiar with the ADA. And about 9% said no, they're not. So we have what looks like on the surface a very compelling number of people on campus who say, yes, I know about the ADA. But as you'll see in the subsequent slides, when we drill down a little bit deeper and kind of explore a little bit their knowledge of what to do and who to contact, etc., the numbers don't look quite so compelling. If we ask them the question, could you explain to a student or employee what a reasonable accommodation is, you see that only about 50% of the population that we sampled say that yes, they could, that they know and understand what a reasonable accommodation is. Now, we didn't ask them to tell us what that is, so we didn't really get a good sense of whether they actually do know what the definition of a reasonable accommodation is. But at least they subjectively feel like they know what that is. That's a significant number of people who are not comfortable yet with understanding what a reasonable accommodation is. We asked them to indicate who they would contact, or do they know who to contact if they themselves or an employee needed an accommodation for a disability. And again, a significant percentage, over 50%, are saying, yes, I know who to contact. We had a follow-up question, which was an open-ended question, and asked them to just type in who that would be. And I cannot summarize the answers there because they were all over the map. There was quite a laundry list of people they would contact, from their chairperson in their department to a variety of people on campus. There were certain clusters of people like John Pierce, human resources, things of that nature, but there was a lot of variability in that suggests that maybe we have some room to educate people about that. I think Mark's presentation earlier about the website, I think, is going to be a good resource. People will have a place where they can go and know who they can contact in the future. We asked who they would contact if, or do they know who to contact if a student needed an accommodation for a disability. Again, very similar numbers. A little bit more than half felt like they knew who to contact. A little bit less than half said they didn't. And again, in the open-ended responses, they were quite varied with respect to that. When it comes to who to contact for an environmental barrier, they were less confident in that. Only about 40% or so felt like they knew who to contact. And again, we asked in an open-ended response, you got things that were a little bit more accurate: facilities management, Lennis Peterson, to a variety of other people on campus. So we need to do a better job, I think, about educating people about that. A subsequent question here is, if you had a disability or have a disability, would you feel comfortable reporting your disability and receiving accommodations? Now, there were three options here. One is, yes, I would feel comfortable; no, I wouldn't. Or they had the option of saying that, it doesn't really apply to me. I don't have or haven't had a disability. About 60% chose that not applicable option. So I think a better way to present this is to focus on the people who may have had a disability or have a disability, and look at the ratio of individuals who say, yes, I am comfortable reporting a disability and asking for accommodations. And we'll see that about 75, 76% felt comfortable, but there's a significant minority here, about 26%, who do not feel comfortable disclosing their disability and asking for accommodations. And that's a population that we really need to reach out to and try to do a better job of creating an environment where they feel that level of comfort. Now, we asked some subsequent questions that were really specific to supervisors, people who at some level or another supervise employees on campus. Of our original sample of 499, 151 people said yes, they do supervise employees in some capacity. We asked these individuals, have you ever been asked to make an accommodation for an employee due to a disability? And the majority of them said, no, I haven't really been in that position. We also asked then, for those people who said yes, they have been asked, did they involve the Human Resources Department in the process of deciding whether to make an accommodation? And again, relatively few, less than half, chose to contact Human Resources and go through that procedure. We asked also of those people who had been asked if they actually made an accommodation, and the good news is that most of them in fact had. Near 90% had in fact made an accommodation when asked to do so. We also asked them if they used Human Resources in trying to formulate what the nature of that accommodation would be, as opposed to handling that situation on their own. Again, relatively few people are using Human Resources and the people who are trained there to help them formulate how to accommodate these disabilities. We had a second set of questions that had to do with people who are specifically teaching students on campus. 144 people answered yes to this. These individuals were asked if they had ever been asked by a student to make an accommodation due to a disability. The vast majority of them said yes to this, over 70%, over 75%. We asked if they involved, excuse me, if they had ever actually made that accommodation for the student, and the vast majority, over 95%, yes, they had in fact made an accommodation when a student had asked them for an accommodation. We asked if they used the Office of Disability Accommodations on campus, and unfortunately, perhaps, relatively fewer had in fact done that, but the majority had. And when it came to deciding, to whether they would formulate this accommodation, they in fact had relied on the ODA office to do that. All right, so that's the gist of what we were trying to do, and just to give you some quick summary conclusions here, I think there's room for improvement. We have educated a lot of people on campus, but there are still some people who don't know who to contact. They don't know exactly maybe how to go about formulating what's the right accommodation to make. Some areas to be addressed would be the knowledge of who to contact, better utilization of available resources on campus, and making sure that we are creating an environment where people are comfortable with disclosing their disabilities and asking for accommodations. And one last point I'd like to make here is that this was a survey of employees on campus, staff, and this is not a survey that included students in any way. So it would be interesting to extend our work perhaps in the future to ask students from their side of this whole framework what their perceptions are about their comfort with disclosing, their knowledge of who to disclose to, how to go about getting accommodations, and the like. Okay? That's all I have. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lee. Again, Lee will be part of a panel later on in the afternoon to answer other questions. So if you want to write those on the palm of your hand or wherever you keep notes. The welcoming table at the entry has brochures on there about the ADA committee. If you don't now have one of those, you may want to grab a few and take them back to your offices, pass them about, whatever. I'd like to pick a minute on my friend Ken Jewell. Ken's not a big man, he's skinny, but he can really eat. So if any of you want to follow Ken through the lunch line again, be my guest. So we've talked to you this morning, others have talked to you this morning about the law. You've heard about what the ADA committee is doing, where we ought to be growing and going. But one of the inspirations of the ADA committee right now with us is a consultant on our committee by the name of Scott Grove. Scott has been very active with the Student Empower Network, has helped them with their videos. He's with the committee with us right now, helping us understand not only through Amy Bone's eyes what we ought to be doing with the law, but what are good accommodations, what are what I'll call sensible accommodations. We don't always need to do exactly what the law requires us to do, because sometimes that's not friendly to people with a particular disability. So his input to us has been very, very helpful. Along the way, Scott and his company have developed some videos that they'd like to show with us right now, and you, I think, begin to feel, as the committee does, the passion that Scott has for helping oneself get through these situations that come upon one in life. So with that, I'd like to welcome Scott Grove to the lectern.
Hi, my name is Scott Grove. I am a 100% service-connected paralyzed veteran. In 1992, I fractured my neck at the cervical 6-7 level, essentially leaving me disabled from the chest down. Now, in 2004, I came up with an idea, a theory about something. And now it's 2010, and I'm the president of Rehab Go. Rehab Go is an online resource that develops media to educate, train, and inspire people with disabilities, but at the same time, to offer a tool of support to the loved ones, to teach them about the disability so they can better understand how to help and lend their support to the person who's going through this major transition in their life. Now, after I was hurt, every day I've been on a path of self-improvement. No matter what, on that path, it was imperative for me. In fact, not even just me, anyone dealing with a disability, to take advantage and utilize the tools around them and inside them to become more independent and stronger with every aspect of their life. Now, when I say tools, I mean for me. Now, these are my tools. They ask for my perspective of what ADA means to me and how I apply it in my life. This is it. But tools of support. What I mean by that, family, friends, people who love you and people that love you back. You love back. Very important. People need people. Then we've got internal tools, my internal tools. This is what I do. I keep hitting the mic. You're going to have busted ears. Internal tools. My discipline that I apply with my life every day. Everything that I do now, applying the discipline. And then the motivation that I have. The motivation to wanting to do better and become the best I can, the best person I can be for me. And then what fuels all that? What fuels all that, my friends, is my appreciation for being alive. Because I realized how quick life can come to a screeching halt or be over. And I felt that, and I went through that, and I've regretted some things. I don't want to regret things anymore. Life is a beautiful gift, and it's like you want to squeeze the life juice out of every day once you've seen the light. And I saw the light. Anyway, then you've got tools tools from the community. Tools from the community, like wheelchair vendors, people that sell wheelchairs, pretty important tool for me. Then you've got modified vehicles. Just the heck with it. Hello? I'm just gonna go like this. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, now where was that? We got community. Tools from the community. Wheelchairs, important with, then modified vehicles. I mean, just think of that. Not being able to get in your car, go to see family, go be with friends, go get a fatty burger thrown through the window at you. I mean, it's just a peace of mind. And then, accessible housing. How powerful of a tool is that? To give somebody with a disability the opportunity to live independently in their own home? I mean, how powerful can that be? That's your structure, that's your core, that's where you build it all. And then, there's the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. This is probably the largest tool, in my mind, that enables you to utilize all your other tools. The ADA is the vessel that opens the door of opportunity by providing legislation that requires the community to adhere to a set of rules, to eliminating all the barriers and making the environment accessible for everyone to be able to participate. And much of barriers in there. Barriers. What have humans done since the beginning of time when we faced a barrier? We plow through it, we jump over it, we find a way to get around it. That's what ADA does. Their objective is to eliminate the barriers within the community again, to make it accessible so everybody can participate in what the community has to offer. If you offer that to someone, that's enlightenment, that's freedom. Now, there's over 50 million disabilities out there. There's no way I could even begin to describe all those. But what I can do is give you a small taste of what I face when I get out, when I'm getting out and going out in my day. Just a small one, because we've got a little bit of a time constraint, and I want to show you something here. When I get out, when I'm rolling my truck, so I get in the parking lot. I'm just going to get me in the building. So I'm looking for the handicap stall. Hopefully there is one. And then when I get to the stall, I make sure that it's not too much of an incline or decline, because I'm already at a compromising position with my balance, with my level of injury. So if you've got an incline or decline, I mean, I'm off balance. And I'm already susceptible to falling as it is. So then I'm looking for the ramp to make sure it's clean, clear, not 17-inch potholes in it, or 3 inches from the sidewalk, because I'll tell you what, they're out there. And sometimes you get there and there's no ramp. This happens. So then I get onto the sidewalk, and then it's the same thing with the sidewalk. You've got to be very cognizant of this. These are things you got to process all the time, but you get used to it. You got to get over these things, overcome and endure. But then again, I've got these small casters, I don't know if you can see, but they're just little 5-inch casters. I've gone along on the sidewalk, hit the 2-inch gap and went down. I've gone across where they have grates for the sewer and for leaves and all that stuff. I've hit it and gone down. And so those are more things. I mean, every step from the truck into the building. And now I go to enter into the building, and I'm praying to see one of those beautiful one little square round handymans on the door so I can push that door open for me. But that's not always the case. So what I have to do is, depending upon what side of the door, anyway, just give me an example. I lock this side. I hold the chair with this side. I open the door, throw it myself in, because at least, no pun intended, I've got a foot in the door. And then if it's an accessible door, they're slow. They don't come whacking. There's plenty of whacks on this thing where I've been hit. But at least I'm in the door. But the accessible doors come in slowly. Got enough time, boom, I'm in the door. So the door is another challenge, another barrier. But then this is probably the biggest barrier that you face when you go to your meeting, go out, go to your lunch, go to work, go to anywhere in the community, is the bathroom. Can you imagine going to your scheduled appointment, your whatever you're doing, and can you imagine not having the opportunity to go to the bathroom because you couldn't get in it? So that's another thing. I look at the door. Now sometimes accessibility to some people means planting a blue sign up front with a handyman on it and putting a bar in a bathroom. They're done. I've been through it, I see it. But the bathroom, there again, opening the door. Some doors are extremely heavy, and you can find out real quick. So it's another matter of learning and positioning, but opening the door. And then to be able to find, or hopefully get in the stall, and it's big enough so I can turn around, do my thing, shut the door, and lock it so I can have a bit of discretion while I'm doing my thing. And then you come out, and I'm looking at the counters. Where's the level of the sink? Is it 13 feet high? Can I reach the soap and the napkin things? I mean, some things can be beautiful, but then where'd the rest of the brain go on doing these things? Now, I'm going to stop here. I have more to talk about, but I have a DVD. It's a compilation of 3 DVDs that we developed. In fact, I want to say my best friend and business partner just came in the door. I want to introduce him because he was my mentor and helped me and guided me and took care of me and helped me develop what I am today. And also, we have brought about, 10 or 20 DVDs, and he'll be over there collecting the cash. If you guys would like to buy one, check them out. But anyway, time is escaping us. I want to go ahead and roll the DVD. We got one more presentation, and then some time for Q&A. So I want to get to this, show you this, okay? Be right back. Go for it. Hello, my name is Scott Grove. In 1992, I fractured my neck at the cervical 6-7 bone. After my injury, there was nothing but chaos and confusion for me and my loved ones. All my family and friends could say was, I love you, and I'm sorry. So we developed this DVD to give you a tool of support, to give you some information at a time when there seems to be no answers. The DVD is going to cover 6 topics. This is information you need to be aware of when dealing with a disability. Cardiovascular health, weight management, pain care, wound care, muscle strengthening, self-esteem, and dealing with depression. For the caregivers.
It's important to be aware and maintain a healthy heart and cardiovascular system after a spinal cord injury. Your heart is the pump that sends blood and nutrients and oxygen to all the muscles, ligaments, and nerves in your body. And so a person is going to want to take healthy control and take healthy care of their heart. That's going to include eating a healthy diet, getting regular rest, getting a moderate dose of exercise, and avoiding things such as smoking or high cholesterol diets. We're counting on that heart to power our muscles, our nerves, our ligaments, our tendons, and our thinking in order to live a successful life after spinal cord injury.
Every injury is unique, requiring different types of equipment and assistance depending upon your level of function. There are a wide range of activities and exercises you can apply to stimulate your cardiovascular system. We're going to demonstrate 4 different exercises that I use in maintaining the best cardiovascular health for me. Endurance pushing, the hand bike, the weighted sled pull, and swimming. This is probably the most convenient and easiest way to get the blood pumping without having to rely on a specific piece of equipment. The hand bike. This machine has proven very useful to me. I have a total of 20-25% function with my right hand, and I have no function from my left hand, except for the tenodesis motion from my wrist. So I'm able to use the hand bike by strapping my hands on the push bars with A straps. Weighted sled pull. There's been a lot of trial and error in developing a consistent regimen of exercises for me. The weighted sled pull is an exercise we developed around my wheelchair and my level of function. Swimming. Swimming is probably one of the best cardiovascular exercises for anyone. And with the proper assistance, swimming can be adapted for most anyone.
In the pool, we use basically 2 different types of equipment. We use resistive equipment to work against the resistance of the water, and we also use buoyant equipment. So the buoyant equipment wants to float, so you have to use your muscles to control it as you lower it in the water, and then you also have to control it as it comes up out of the water so that it doesn't come up too fast. All of the equipment in the water can also be modified depending on your fingers and your hands and how well you can use them. And so we can also use fins to create resistance of the water. One of the nicest things about the water is that in the water you get resistance against all planes of motion, whereas on land you're only getting resistance of gravity as you work with weights. However, in the water we're using resistive equipment to increase your strength as you move against the resistance and the turbulence of the water. You can do water-resisted activities to work against the water's turbulence, and you can also use water-assisted activities to increase range of motion as well as improve strength.
In the pool, we also can use equipment such as you see here, using a bench for balance activities. This will carry over into your function on land as an independent individual, as it will teach you trunk range of motion and balance in a safe environment where if you fall, you have a caregiver or a therapist available to help you. We can also perform snaking activities in the aquatic environment with the help of a caregiver or a therapist using buoyant equipment and supportive devices. This will help with trunk range of motion as well as muscle relaxation and pain relief. The most important part about all the activities you perform in the water is that they be recreational and fun, but more importantly that they're functional and that they carry over to all the activities you perform on land to make you more independent as an individual. If you're afraid to get in the water, don't be. Come with a friend that you trust. Sign up with a physical therapist who you might trust that can teach you the most appropriate way to get in and out of the pool as well as to move in the pool with the most appropriate adaptive devices. Anybody can do this, no matter what level of injury you have.
This was incredible. We really enjoyed ourselves. This is one of 5 cardiovascular exercises we're going to be demonstrating to you. And this is the whole thing, just breaking down the barriers and trying some things that are new. We loved it. I can't wait to do it again. When can we do it again? pull back, focus on some positive, and let's go work out.
Hello, my name is Justin Reddy, professional trainer, powerlifter. We are at Big Iron Gym in Omaha, Nebraska. Big Iron Gym is one of the top powerlifting gyms in the world, with countless world record holders. I am here today with Scott Grove. Scott is a C6, C7, incomplete quadriplegic. We are here to give you a detailed instructional workout series developed for persons with wheelchair disabilities. I am here to teach you, your physical therapist, or your professional trainer, a proven system to increase propulsion strength, transferring strength, balance, and most importantly, self-esteem and mental toughness. This DVD will be a 6-part series to include workouts for shoulders, biceps, triceps, chest, back, and an interactive cardiovascular routine. We work out 5 days a week with resistance training and 3 days a week of cardio. I strongly recommend that everyone have physician approval before starting an exercise regimen. Day one's workout is for shoulders, or the deltoid muscles. These muscles are of utmost importance in regards to transferring from the chair to the bed, the shower chair, and the vehicle. Increasing the size and strength of the shoulders also has a tremendous effect on propulsion power. Our first exercise will be the seated shoulder press. We do 3 sets, 8 to 12 repetitions. Our first set will start off at a lightweight to warm up with 12 repetitions. It's important when you're lifting, be sure to remember on the negative part of the rep, or in this case, on the way down, you want to be taking your breath in. On the hard part of the rep, on the way up, you want to be breathing out. That allows our muscles to be getting oxygen to power them through finishing the end of our set. Let's get 5 more, Scotty. 2, remembering to breathe in, out, in, out, in. Good. 1 more. Excellent. Then we will rest approximately 45 to 60 seconds before we do our next set.
Throughout my life, living with a disability, for several years I went through a lot of pain and anguish and dealing with a lot of denial. There are certain steps you need to take to break through that, to endure, to overcome, and it's not easy. But for me, the first start was I had to start getting my body right and my mind right. Working my body out, getting myself stronger, made my mind stronger. I couldn't have done it without my dedication and good, beautiful friends like Justin to be my personal trainer and help me through this, to wake and work in a regular gym like this.
I think it's important to realize and to keep in mind, however, that an individual with a good attitude, who maintains heart fitness, who addresses their strength and their flexibility and helps control their spasticity, who watches their skin, can indeed go on and live a happy, successful, productive life.
After my injury, for several years, I rolled around with a pretty big chip on my shoulder, and it created a lot of negative anxiety for me and my family. So that's why I developed this DVD, to share it with you 15 years of my experience of living with an SCI, in the hope that you can take the information and reduce some of the pain, anguish, and confusion that you may be dealing with your injury. You're going to go through a grieving process. You deserve those tears. After my injury, I was in total disbelief. I had no idea what had happened to my body, and I was scared. All I was being told was, I'm never going to walk again. I didn't know how to deal with that. That was overwhelming to me. And this is when I started to begin my walls of denial. Denial, my thoughts and thinking, I'm not good for anything. I could never be a good father anymore. I was less of a man. I felt like there was so much more for me to do and see, and that I wasn't going to be able to do that from a wheelchair. Sometimes after an injury, you get so caught up in the emotional turmoil of facing your disability. You forget about what's important. You've overcome odds that most people consider heroic. So the first thing you need to do on this path of therapy is start setting goals. For us to attain anything in life, it requires discipline. And it's so important that you establish yourself some goals, especially now.
I think it's important in life that you always have goals. And when you first come to the rehab center, people are going to meet with you about establishing goals. And sometimes those are short-term goals of you're just going to learn how to roll. You're just going to learn how to do a standing pivot or something. And basic goals are important at the beginning, but then you got to strive for long-term goals. Where do you want to be out in the community? Where do you want to be in your own life? If that means going back to school, go back to school. If that means getting involved in your church, it means finding a church that you can get involved in. If that means going back and finding a job, a career, let's get you back at it. But don't just be content sitting at home. It's time to go on with life. And goals are important not only in the rehab center, but once you are discharged from the rehab center.
This is going to be a time in your life when you reflect a lot about what's happened to your life and where you're going to go from here. And having too much time on your hands right now can be mentally destructive. Your mind can be your own worst enemy or your best ally. As you're going through therapy, you're going to have questions. So ask the doctors, the nurses, and the therapists, especially listen to your therapist. They have a lot of very important information to teach you about your injury so you can better understand and manage your own healthcare needs. I want to talk to you about support network. Since we were children, we needed someone to love us, to talk to, for us to lean on. It's so important that you establish a support network for yourself. This is going to be a time again when you're reflecting so much and you need those people to talk to bounce the ideas off of, to share your good times and your hardships with. This is a huge part of the healing process, is knowing that you've got someone there to vent, to bounce these things off of. And there's nothing more that builds the self-confidence up better than when your loved ones, your families, the people that are close to you, when you've accomplished a goal from the dedication that you're putting towards this motivating getting better, and then they see you and they see you accomplish a goal, they're proud of that, man. That makes you feel incredible. And so that's a big part is your support network. Rely on those people, build those things. That's one of the most major important parts of your therapy, is loving those people around you and surrounding yourself with the positive. And the support network doesn't have to be a person. It can be a place or a thing. Nature was a big thing for me. I had to pull back and have time to think and figure my thoughts out. I had all these people trying to tell me what to do and where to go and how to do it. But sometimes that doesn't matter. The main thing is that you get the focus up here. Is that you appreciate that you've still got your mind. I had to pull back, and there was a solarium in my hospital where you could go, and there was just birds and trees. And so I would escape there throughout 5-6 times during the day between my therapies. But it wasn't pulling away, running away. I actually had a place to go think. And that's the important thing, is that you rely on that support network to go think. Mine was nature, the gym, getting out and meeting with people, and filling my life with new activities, new hobbies and activities that were special to me. I want to talk to you about a belief system, something I've utilized every day in my life. It's been a significant part of me moving forward, and I hope that maybe this is something that you could utilize in your life. What if actually believing in yourself was the fuel for you to better yourself and to live a more fulfilling life? What if actually believing in yourself did that? That's just a matter of getting out there and exploring and investigating new hobbies and interests that, what best you choose. What do you enjoy? Get back to you. Get back to what you're good at. Enjoy. You've got nothing but time on your hands right now. So appreciate the fact that you have that time, and focus the fact you're a very strong individual. We're all unique. We all have the talents and abilities. Now you've got time to think and approach and slowly go about that and rebuild your life with more character and wisdom from the things that you've lived and understood that others won't. Think of it this way. I want you to remember a number. 75. 75 summers,
75 winters, 75 springs, 75 falls. Now when you think of it that way, it doesn't seem like there's much time left, does it? So why would you want to waste another minute? Embrace your disability. Be proud that you've survived this horrific event. In closing, I had no idea I was going to come this far. When I was laying in bed and I had to be moved and transferred, everybody do everything for me and all the personal gigs, which I'm sure you're just getting used to now, I had no idea I was going to come this far. And to me, this is far. This is what I've done for me. I've embraced my disability and I realized I've got something to give back. To do something, I've got to teach others about my disability, what I've overcome, because I believed inside that I had something special to give. And going through this stuff and overcoming this adversity, there are others watching to follow you. And I knew inside that, you know, I couldn't give up. There was just something driving me inside. Even when I was on that path of going just the normal route, not wanting to push the envelope and not wanting somebody to see me try this or maybe have an accident, fall, or other kinds of accidents or whatever, that's about pushing the envelope. What other way is there to think of this? It's just an injury. Are you going to let the injury, this wheelchair or whatever disability, that doesn't stop this. You still got your mind. The most powerful tool and computer on the world is right here. So am I going to let this injury stop me? I know that's hard to face in the beginning, but just think about it. It's actually keeping it pretty simple. It's just an injury. Am I just supposed to stop my brain now? Am I dead? No, I'm not. So you embrace that part. You appreciate the fact that you're alive. And you don't ever let go of those talents and abilities. You've got a lot of time to think, time to approach and think about what you want to do. So do it. So watch this DVD over and over and bring your family. This thing was made for you. And again, I've gone through a lot of information really quick. So watch it again and again and again. And let those people around you see and understand some of these things that you're going to need to be cognizant of. There's important issues in here that no matter what, you need to pay attention to. But, you know, I didn't want to be forsaken. I didn't want to be looked at as, you know, the guy in the wheelchair. And that's why I'm giving you this information. To put that in you now. To start fueling you up. To handle some of these things that are coming towards you. For me, there were a couple things I needed to do. I mean, the gym was very important to me. That's where I found, you know, because perception means so much. We're always so worried about what people think of us and how we look and whatnot. Well, especially if you're dealing with a disability, you're conscious of that. So for me, the gym was a very important part. That's where I got I was getting my body stronger and feeling better, but it got my mind stronger and feeling better. And I began to feel much more, I started to fill my soul, and I started to believe more in myself. By strengthening my body, I was strengthening my mind. And not only my mobility and my strength, but my overall independence, which fed my self-esteem. And it doesn't matter what has happened to you in life. It doesn't matter where, you know, we're all where we're at, but where do you want to go from here? And it's a matter of believing in yourself and applying that belief to wherever you're at today, to whatever situation applies. You know, you can do what you want to do if you set your mind to it. This is not the end, it's just the beginning.
I appreciate that. And the thing is if you take, we've got another presenter here, but if you take our disabled population, I mean, we're supposed to look at our population, our community as a whole, right? So if you take their disabled population, embrace them, offer them the same opportunities as everyone else has, especially in education, to go explore and express their talents and abilities, then all we have done is made our community that much stronger, you know? And this is a result of the ADA providing these opportunities for me, but me applying the discipline to never giving up. When the fight's all you got, but you never let go, because you can turn around and there's always somebody in a worse position, or they're 6 feet under. Life's a beautiful gift. You don't waste it. Anyway, there's what you saw there. That, again, was a compilation of 3 DVDs we made. Where'd Justin go? Anyway, oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. There he is. He's got some of our DVDs. We reduced the price so you could take a peek at them if you want to buy them. We've got one for 10 and one for 15. And Healthier Living. Anyway, go talk to him, check him out if you're interested at all. Or please, visit. It's preliminary. We're rocking and rolling. But check out www.rehabgo.com. You didn't see that very much, did you? Anyway, rehabgo.com. And you can check us out there. Anyway, I think we have another presenter, and I'd love some Q&A if nobody's, if we've got time. But Lennis, do you? Yeah, let's get it on. Anybody have any questions? I don't care. Let it cut loose. Whatever you want to ask, it's all good. There's no way that we can begin and the barriers here. We break the barriers by we let go. You got a guy up here that's survived some significant stuff, and I've opened up my guts so you can talk and find and learn about it. That's what I'm here to do. I'm just a messenger boy. Yes. Sure. And you would have paid $300 for the DVD, right? Maybe we need to adjust those prices, JR. Yes, please. Well, you do. Well, I do, but you come down to their level. First of all, where are they at? Where's their mind at? What are they focused on at that age group? What do they enjoy? What do they do? What are their mom and dad like? Get a feel for what's going on. But come in there as one. I'm not there to, you are going to, you learn from me by us connecting. That's when we are alive, is when we're connecting, and I love children. I have my beautiful, beautiful granddaughters over there. I have my little Kenzie Lynn and my Gabriella here. But the kids are the most magnificent part, and those are the ones we want to hit and touch. So I just work with them. I work with them together, and because I just help them. Whatever they want to know, I answer, because that's the only way they're going to learn. And we need to be honest with our children. We need to teach them the morals and the character and the integrity. And this has given me an opportunity. This is not for me, guys. I'm out here for you. Like I said, I mean this. I'm a messenger boy. And I just want to help. And that's what my buddy and I are all about. So I don't know if that answered your question. I talk too much. Any more? One more? That's okay. So
got to be around in the audience if you want to catch him later. It's just working, and also he'll be part of the Q&A that follows in a minute. So, but thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think you can quickly see why Scott's a great consultant for the ADA committee. Mm-hmm. Kevin Powers is going to join us at the lectern in a moment. Kevin has his PhD from Southern Illinois and is working now in our counseling center, working with students that are needing accommodation. Some of you had the opportunity to hear Kevin before, but we wanted to welcome him back again because as you listened to Amy talk a bit ago, there are a lot of changes in the law, and a lot of the accommodation that a student might have had has suddenly become much more broader. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Kevin to the lectern and let him give us an update on where his office is at. Thanks, Kevin.
Appreciate your willingness to listen this late. I realize that we've eaten lunch and we got to watch a very exciting video, and now I'm up here talking. So I'm very mindful of that, so thank you very much for listening. What I'm going to talk about for just a few minutes here before we get to question and answer time is the role that counseling services plays, how our office coordinates with Office of Disabilities, how we identify some of the hidden disabilities that Amy had talked about in part of her presentation that go along with the ADA. So what I have up here is a brief description of what I'll do, just talking about the presence, how we recognize the presence of a disorder, and how we can be part of that conversation that identifies what reasonable accommodations might be. So, how do we recognize the presence of a disorder? Basically, we look for specified symptoms. Now, symptoms can really be specific behaviors, ways of thinking, feelings that someone might have, whatever their emotions are, that go along with a specified diagnosis. We also want to consider how long they've been experiencing those symptoms and how they're impacting their life. Okay? Now, for example, something like ADD can be a hidden disability. So it's going to be marked by difficulties paying close attention to details, difficulties listening, sustaining attention over long periods of time, being forgetful, struggling to attend to things, even such as conversations with other people. Okay? And you want to see that in maybe the school setting, also at home or at work. You want to see it in a bunch of different areas. And so that's kind of what we look for, these specific symptoms for specific durations and things like that. As I mentioned, we need to make sure that they're there and they're there long enough and that they cause some kind of problem. I think at some point everybody gets distracted and everybody has a hard time paying attention. I can think back to many lectures that I did not find very exciting and it was really hard to pay attention. But I don't have ADD. I don't have the experience of standing up here and, oh, there are cameras there, but then there's also a tree, and I wonder if that tree is real or if it's fake. If it's a fake tree, what do they have at the bottom to keep it there? You know, I have a fake tree in my office, and you can see where you start to just kind of go all over the place. Now, some examples of some hidden disabilities that are just, not something you are going to visibly see and may or may not be aware of. Things like learning disorders, such as reading, math, writing, ADHD, different kinds of anxiety disorders, or developmental disorders. They exist. And I think that's important to know, and there's a standardized way of identifying them. I often think of what it's like to be faculty and wondering, okay, someone's complaining that they're having trouble with concentration and they want extra time or on a test and they're saying they have ADD, and is that really true, and can I trust that that's really going on? And what I am here to say is that there is, and I would certainly recommend sending them to our office so we can kind of assess for those things and see what might be most beneficial for them. For something like a reading disorder, for example, we'll give a standardized IQ test and compare that to actual reading ability, which allows us to compare kind of how well you think someone kind of should be able to do based on their natural abilities and how well they actually do in areas such as reading or math or writing. And if there's a significant difference there, that tells you something. Now, as I mentioned, we have these standard evaluation procedures that we use to guide our decisions, what we diagnose, what we recommend, what we think a reasonable accommodation might be. And what goes into that is, it's actually a pretty lengthy process. I originally actually will have people fill out a self-report questionnaire that basically asks what school has been like, what subjects you do well in, what subjects you do poorly in, what kind of student have you been, What's reading like for you, math, writing, and it'll also ask about problems with concentration, problems with anxiety, depression, sleep, a whole bunch of other things that can get in the way academically that may or may not be, may or may not require accommodations. But also as part of that, I spend a lot of time talking one-on-one with the student, getting their experience, what kind of their chief complaint is, why they're coming to see me now. And depending on that information, we'll talk together and decide, okay, do we want to do some more formal testing that will help either support or refute or kind of clarify some of our concerns. So there's a lot of different information that goes in there, some of it that one-on-one dialogue communication with the student, and some more standardized formal assessments that we can use to compare how they're doing in these areas against more standardized samples, groups of people, kind of like comparing how well I would do against the average person. Okay. Not all referrals are diagnosed with disability, and students are screened for several areas of personal and academic functioning. The way I look at it, there's a lot of reasons that someone might wonder why they're struggling in school. And that can be the presence of a hidden disability, such as a reading disorder or ADHD or some type of anxiety disorder that really is impeding their ability to do well here. But it might also be that they're not all that interested in being a student. Maybe they came from an academic background that didn't prepare them as well for kind of the academic rigors of being here. Those are very different concerns that you want to address in a very different way. And I actually look at some of these hidden disabilities that I had on the previous slide as what? The last problem standing. I want to make sure I'm ruling out all other possibilities so I can be confident and know that what I'm looking at, yes, is a reading disability or ADHD or something along those lines that would be a hidden disability that would warrant some type of accommodation. Now, as Amy mentioned, the changes in ADA have resulted in a more inclusive criteria for identifying these people. What we want to consider is people's experience now, but also people's experience before. You want to have a good idea of what, at least in my realm as academic success psychologists, most of the people that end up coming to my office have some academic concern, and I need to know if that's kind of a more long-standing issue or something that is more prevalent now. And I want to know how that's impacting their school. One of the criteria actually for making a lot of the diagnoses that we do is that it requires some kind of impairment in a person's life. For example, if I'm diagnosing ADHD, that difficulty with concentration and focus needs to have some kind of impact on their school, relationships, work life. And so you want to be aware of how that is impairing their life, which also is going to help inform me what are going to be some reasonable accommodations if it looks like that's going to be what's going to be required. What else did I want to mention about that? Not sure. Okay. Now, what's important for us in making some of these decisions is, again, what Amy mentioned, the idea of mitigating measures, I believe is what it's called. Right. And the idea that someone might be on medication for depression or ADHD, but that doesn't mean that they don't warrant having some kind of accommodation to help them through. The idea is you take away that medication or alternative kind of help, and those symptoms are going to be more prominent and difficult to do well, at least academically here. And so we want to be mindful of that when we're talking with students. And the idea that grades are not really the standard representation of whether or not someone needs some kind of accommodation. Someone might have a really, really high IQ, which would suggest that they could do really, really well in school, but maybe are getting C's in math. And you think, okay, well, they're getting through the program, and that's fine, and they're getting passing grades. But at the same time, based on how well they could be doing, they could do actually a lot better. And the amount of time and energy that they have to put in to get those grades reflects that discrepancy between what they can do and what their actual performance is. And that's where you start to wonder, you know, well, is this a math-specific problem, and what kind of accommodations would help allow them to be more successful and really demonstrate their actual abilities. Now, what I think is most relevant, at least right now, is the idea of the hidden aspect of the disability. And I think that can be a pretty big obstacle. We don't know that if these disabilities are there unless someone is willing to ask us or disclose to us or talk with us. And that can be a really, really difficult thing to do. And I think what's really most important for fellow students, faculty, staff, whoever it might be, is just to be mindful about how these things are talked about. I mean, if I put myself in the shoes of a student and I overhear a professor or some staff member talking about learning disabilities and say, oh, well, they really don't exist, they just need to try harder, or ADHD, well, they're just lazy or just trying to get extra time or something along those lines, and they just need to buckle down and focus and concentrate and put their nose to the grindstone. I think that sends a message to our students about kind of what's legitimate and what's not. And I would encourage people to be mindful about how those conversations go. When it comes to things that are hidden, I want to make it as safe an environment for people to be willing to come to me and disclose some of this stuff so that we can help them in the best way possible. Be it working one-on-one with someone in our office or some type of academic accommodation through the Office of Disability Accommodations or whatever that might be. It's just something to be mindful of. Whenever something is hidden, it can be really, really difficult to talk about. And so I'd encourage you to be mindful. The other thing I wanted to mention, if I can find it here, is one, where we are and really what we can do. My counseling service is located in the Harper Center. I like to think of this as a resource for students, but also for faculty and staff. I really think if someone is wondering about a disability, or if someone is working with a student and they're wondering if their concerns or questions are something that might warrant accommodations, or if this might be some other issue, contact us, call us, talk with us, speak with us. We would be happy to consult, to meet with the student, to talk about what might be reasonable and what could be helpful. And we're available, and we'd like to help out in any way that we can. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. I guess it also, a lot of that's going to depend on how it's impacting them. If it's something like school, or they're finding that I get so distracted by what's going on in class or while I'm taking a test and what other people are doing. It might be, well, let's give you a little bit extra time because that distraction is going to be there, so we'll give you enough time to include that as well so you can get through the whole test. It might be allow this person to sit in the front so there's less distraction in front of them. Beyond that, depending on where it's impacting them. It might be just helping them with various life skills, time management, that kind of stuff, organization, things that are generally kind of difficult for students that have ADHD. So it kind of depends, student by student thing. Well, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. Yeah.
It's time now for our panel discussion. We were going to have some people come up and set up a stage, but since the audience is dwindling rather quickly, I think we're going to save those men energy and do this a bit more informally. My logistic is this. We'll ask Scott to roll up to the table right there in front of me, right there, and the rest of the presenters come to Scott's table, and we'll just have a little bit of an informal discussion right there for anybody that wants to be talking with the panel. So Kevin, if you join us, Amy, if you join us at this table, Wade, Lee, we'll just work right from this table. That's going to drive Mark crazy because he wants to get this on video, but I'll take my beating later from Mark. So.